Welcome to Witchcraft.
'Cause it's Witchcast.
I'm Emily.
I'm Kate.
And we're your co-hosts of this, the Witchcast podcast.
That's right. We're your learning, growing, ever-evolving novice witches here to explore everything under the woo-woo esoteric umbrella.
And what a gorgeous umbrella it is, filled with all sorts of interesting people doing interesting things. And today we have a very interesting person who I'm thrilled to have here. He's been one of my internet friends for a long time, and I'm glad to actually get to chat. Please welcome Scottish food historian Peter Gilchrist. Yay!
Good evening. Hello, America.
AKA at
Yes, all the
Tenement
way.
Kitchen.
Yeah, I did commit to having a named blog about 8 years ago, and then
You
know,
gotta.
I will never be famous now because no one will ever know my name.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that's so
No.
common, though. I feel like everyone has a named blog, you know?
I'm I'm the Sia of like food journalism. That's it.
The sea of journalism.
I get that. I feel like for me, I have the opposite problem, which is that everyone knows my name and no one knows the name of like my YouTube channel or anything like that. It's just me, and I'm always like, I have to put with Emily Duncan in everything so that people can find it.
Branding is so
Yeah.
branding's hard. It's
We
hard.
have to be an industry. Even
Yeah.
in our craft, even in our food, even in our witchcraft, we have to be an industry.
I
Ugh,
know you
it's
know
exhausting.
it. So tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, just so you're a Scottish food historian. We know that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Tell us about your life.
yeah, I was born in the early 90s in a town called Paisley. You may have heard of the Paisley pattern. Or
Yes.
Paisley.
Love her.
That was a print that was popularized by the weavers of our town. And then
No
they
way.
created shawls that was designed by all these prints that were coming out of like South Asia, and they were kind of moving across Europe. But the weavers in our town were one of the only weavers who had, as part of their normal education, like drawing, painting, poetry. They had like the arts was like invested in this very poor town. But it meant that when they came to like making shawls, they were able to do more than copy. They started to create, and they were able to do everything much cheaper. And so these shawls like created essentially this town. So like
Wow.
history and heritage has always been like central when I think about my childhood. There was like the esteem that comes from having a rich heritage, even though when I grew up in it, it was a really poor place to live. It was one of like, sometimes you hear about Scotland being like the most dangerous capital of Europe. Like,
Really?
Really?
that's from my town. Yeah, well, before Braveheart like changed us into was like rolling moors and highlands. We were like European
Wow.
poverty. So, but yeah, and I kind of had this very working class upbringing. Always in proximity to poverty, always in proximity to violence. It's just that thing that kind of goes hand in hand when you live in centres of deprivation. And I went through most of my life really not having just carrying like immense like poverty shame. I went to study fashion at university, and then like you kind of realize at school you're the poor person in the class, and then you're an adult and you move out your circles and you go, oh no, I'm poor in comparison to the country. And that then came a lot of like performative food stuff, and I initially began Tenement Kitchen as like a way to like, I'm going to show off everything I know about food, and everything's going to be fresh, and I'm going to use really problematic stuff, really problematic tropes, and I'm talking about food, about quality and organic and great produce and all that sort of stuff. And then my last grandparent passed away, and I inherited her family cookery book. And in this book, there was maybe a dozen recipes that I already recognized. And that's because they were in my other grand's cookbook. Now, my mum's mum had passed away about a decade before I was born. And these two women, my two grands, who were from opposite ends of Scotland and never met, had 12 of the exact same recipes that they had copied down into their family cookery books. And
Ooh, I have chills.
at that moment, that was like my like, oh, this is what there's a question here, and it's not a question I can answer, and it's not the hollow stuff I've been doing. It's not the meaningless sourdough trips or the things we do to try and draw attention. There's something that's meaningful to me here, and that was my first step into like asking questions about food history. And then I began to look into like the history of like where does shortbread come from? And I was looking into there's this old I don't have it to hand, it's next door, but it's the Glasgow Cookery Book, which was like a 1915 book, like a school cookery manuscript, and then it got so popular they just started to sell it. I was looking through shortbread recipes, and one of the ingredients in shortbread that matched my grand's recipe was called Paisley flour.
Hmm.
I'm a food historian from Paisley. What the hell
Right.
is
You gotta
Paisley
find
flour?
out what that is.
Turns out 150 years ago, corn flour was patented and created in Paisley by a shirt
No.
manufacturer, Starcher, and they created like maybe in excess of 100 cookery books, all little paper Victorian pamphlets and Edwardian leaflets about how to use corn flour in your baking. And they created baking tins that said Paisley flour across it. And
Mm.
within the space of a generation, not only was I never taught about this, I hadn't. It was just waiting for me to just Google Paisley and shortbread
Right.
for all this stuff to come up, and that's when
Wow.
my life's mission just went. Oh, this has changed everything I think about myself and my upbringing and what it's like to be from Paisley, and I can do this for other people by telling
Yeah.
That's
stories.
incredible.
So that's a
I
wee
mean,
short
and it's-
intro.
That's fascinating. I love
I
it.
am like so emotional already. I feel like I have goosebumps. I feel like I'm gonna cry. That's so beautiful. Wow.
It's-
Wow.
So my dad was a minister when I grew up, and like the thing he always said was like, testimony is your most powerful tool. Now, if you lift that out of a Christian evangelical situation and you put it down in your actual life, the thing that I find most powerful and why it's so in contrast to what I was doing before was that while it's still about me, it's not in service of me. And I do find that when you can talk honestly, as I'm sure you will find out when you talk about what you're interested in or passionate about, and it's in service of talking about it, not about serving you, people can really connect. And I think with food especially, people can get very emotional because they instantly are transported to your relationship with your gran, your relationship with your mum, your relationship with food. It opens people up and prepares them for an honest conversation. So let's jump in.
Yeah, I mean it's that's storytelling in its highest and best form.
Oh, thank you.
If you will.
I love it. I'm just gonna be sobbing over here in a corner for a bit. Continue.
So now that we know a little bit more about you, you reached out to us. Well, you reached out to me for a very specific purpose, which is a project that you're working on right now.
Yeah, I mean, so I have been doing a lot of kind of research into Halloween. A couple of years ago, I got a grant from Scotland Food and Drink, which is like our like organization that looks after Scottish food and drink, for me to do some research into like what are the feasts that we used to have. Now, in a historic calendar, we have had over 200 feasts, and now we might have 4: Christmas, Hogmanay, which is New Year's, Burns Night, and maybe if you're like really into Halloween, you might consider that a feast. But we now have this very short space in our in our life. Maybe Easter if you're into that as well. But so they did a bit of research, and I began to like kind of unravel lots of the history around, really like our ancient beliefs as a people. And it comes down to there's like 4 quarter days in the year. There's Imbolc in February, there's Beltane, there's Lucina, and there's Samhain. And Samhain is what we now call Halloween. And I began to do lots of research into it. And I find I think especially when we're looking at like through the modern lens of witchcraft, through the modern lens of like folklore and belief systems, we're all trying to like work out who are we outside of a big church that stands in the middle of a street looking grand. And I find that for myself, looking into like the folklore of communities, the way they met and broke bread, and why the games and superstitions and fortune telling and things that they did in working class spaces is essentially witchcraft. But it wasn't really called that. It was just what was done. It was just the ritual that went along with the calendar of life in a year. And I thought maybe there's a really interesting conversation to be had here.
Absolutely.
About folklore and belief.
Yeah, and I mean, if anyone who's listening is interested in content about Scottish holidays. Peter has a ton of it, and it is amazing. I am frequently sending it to other people, being like, look at this, look at that.
You're the one. You're the one. Yeah.
If you're seeing one little share on a bunch of your feast videos, it's me.
I'm not like innately shareable sometimes. Like for people that get it, people that are in the space of wanting to hear about it or interested, or actually people over a certain age, because I think sometimes your interest in history and the way things used to be is often tied to the number of people you've lost in your life, where you perhaps, when you have unanswerable questions, you thirst for knowledge, and those unanswerable questions tend to come when you can't ask the people anymore. So I think I'm excited to share it and talk about it. So hopefully it'll catch on eventually. I just have to wait for the zeitgeist to find it. But yeah, so I mean, do you want to jump in?
Well, let me say real fast, two quick things. Just relating this back to the witchcraft side of things. One, to your earlier point, something we talk about on the podcast a lot is that really what is labeled witchcraft is usually just folk practices. And what we talk about is that there's a very wide world of it, because it's really, the label witchcraft comes from someone else usually, for the most part. It's interesting that now we're in a time where people will say like, I'm an eclectic witch or whatever, you know? But for a very long time, witchcraft was about who has power and who doesn't. And what sort of beliefs the people that didn't have power held. And then the second part of it is that the Wheel of the Year has stolen all four of those holidays. A lot of the Celtic holidays show up in Wiccan holidays, and stolen is maybe the wrong word, but they don't always necessarily get that tie back to the original that is, I think, very important and interesting, and something that should always be in conversation with, if we're going to call it Samhain, we got to know what that means.
Yeah, look at the history, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say as well, my focus is on Scottish history, and the thing about lots of the things that we talk about were inherited from Irish people, from whether it was Irish people that came over in the 19th century, whether it was the Gaels that came over some half a millennium ago. I'm going to talk about Scotland specific, and the records that I use are published Scottish writers that are talking about history. I'm not the authority, and no one is the authority on oral history, but it's to give a shout out to my Irish brethren, that again, I'll talk about Scottish context with this. It goes back farther than us.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Excellent point. I first learned a lot of this I did an Irish studies minor when I was at undergrad, because I was homesick, and I was looking for something that reminded me of Nova Scotia, because it's fiddle music and there's Gaelic speaking areas, and so I said, what's like that, and started hanging around the Ireland House at NYU.
I love that.
But it was a really cool way to learn about it. A lot of really interesting people.
You had spoken about Nova Scotia. You can cut this out as well if you want. But you'd spoken, and I always wondered about in terms of growing up there, were there bits of Scottish food culture, Irish food culture, that Gaelic Celtic influence in there? And what do you think? What are those influences?
Extremely Celtic, I would say, in a lot of ways. I mean, in that there were Gaeltachts up until not that long ago. There was a university that taught in it was closer to Scottish Gaelic, the Nova Scotian version. Yeah. But that taught in Gaelic until the 90s.
If we're talking about Scottish Gaelic, it's Gaelic.
Gaelic.
So it's Irish Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic. They're both spelled the exact same, and if no one has ever said that to you,
no, I've heard it before. I was doing a Scottish accent to call it Gaelic.
Gaelic. I always say Scottish, because I've been working in Scottish history and in Scottish culture, and there's such a divide between people that grew up in the Central Belt like me, people that grew up in the Highlands, where that culture is still very much alive. And I have said it wrong several times to prominent people who corrected me. Anyway, but... Yeah,
and then so if you're talking about Irish, most people call it Irish, but it gets confusing when you're talking to people that aren't in that world. And so I try and make it accessible as much as I can.
You have been to Ireland, haven't you? You've been over the pond.
Yeah, my dad and I went and drove around one time to see where my family is like a little bit Scottish and a little bit Irish. I mean, it's like you sort of said, there was a lot of overlap,
Yeah.
especially like they were from like Sligo and Mayo, which is a little more north. Not like Northern Ireland, but like north of Ireland proper.
You're doing a very good job of tiptoeing that political line. That's very good.
I did an Irish studies minor.
I was going to say, I was like, you know what to say and what not to say. That's very good. No, my partner's from the Republic, but he's from the north of the Republic, and I've had again been corrected several times about language to use. But no, that is so interesting, and I think as well the thing that I love about Ireland and people that, if you want to visit Ireland, I would thoroughly recommend it, is that their culture in many ways is so intact. We've been really anglicised in the central belt of Scotland. If you come over to visit, Edinburgh and Glasgow, lots of the Scottish stuff is very gimmicky, and Ireland don't have that level of self-deprecation. They really value, and I think some of it's to do with like how alive like Irish dance has been, Irish music has been. They still teach Gaelic and teach Irish in like primary school, even some into secondary school, and that link with like living culture means that Irish, like the rest of Irish history, isn't a joke. I think in sometimes the way that Scotland can be very self-deprecating about.
Yeah, I wonder whose fault that is. The British.
I know.
I was gonna say colonized.
But I've been having so many of these chats recently with people because like globally, we're not going to get into news, but obviously like
let's not say anything that'll get me deported from the country.
No, not at all.
Also just never end.
But the polarization which is happening is not helping anyone, because what we're getting into is a culture war instead of a class war. And our problem throughout all of history is power, not people. And so much of like, even again, when you grow up in a place which deals with poverty in such a living and present way, it can be very easy, I think, to think about like England as the enemy. And I have to keep reminding myself it's not England, because there's just as many people that have been hurt and harmed by power structures in England, people that I have more in common with than I do a very rich and powerful person in Scotland making decisions that are self-serving and serving of the self.
That's so
good. That is a very good point, and I am sorry that I made that joke.
No,
I don't know, man.
I want to tell you that it has been like, because we are so in the middle of this now, and politics is heating up in Scotland in a really not nice way. And actually, I don't have a big platform, but I talk to lots of people, and a lot of the time the reason that I'm hired is how do we talk about this ingredient for a PR company? How can we market Scotland and this whiskey in a new way, or a way that's historically accurate? And I've had to start asking myself about what is real representation. What am I contributing to a power imbalance here? How am I actually serving what I think is a national interest, but really is about the people interest, and it's working. And it's that, so I'm in the middle of all these conversations in my head.
Amazing.
Constantly.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So I jump on any chance I can to have it with someone else, because I feel like we make progress when we can't keep having these conversations. We take it out of what we agree and disagree on and talk about the people that need to get taxed. Anyway.
Yes.
So,
the highest priority of all.
Yeah. Do we need to take a break at any point, or we just roll right through?
Usually we would roll right through, but if you want a break, you can.
No,
have one
not at all.
We're not quite at the level yet for ads, but
I'll do a little chop if I need it, and everything.
Us neither. We have a Scottish Food History podcast, and we just in the beginning we'll just take a break because I am a scattered talker. Jump around so much that sometimes my co-host Lindsay has to be
you're in good. Yeah. You're in good company here on that front.
On the note though about corrupt systems, if anyone does want to buy any ad time from us, we'll gladly take your money.
We will sell out.
Yeah, we will sell out. We'll.
You heard it first, Palantir.
Yeah. Anyway. Oh my God. But, so in my research, I use a few like key texts, and because again we're thinking about like the type of history we're talking about, I really trying to find like women who are publishers and writers, working class publishers and writers, poets, and then last resort is like newspapers and like books written by rich white men, because lots of our history that has been written by it doesn't necessarily like dictate the reality of working class, of community, of peasant culture in a way where you can kind of see through the nonsense. And actually, I've been trying to get into archaeology more recently because there's some interesting things happening.
Oh.
Yeah, that's where you find some of the good stuff too.
Well, it's one of these like you're like, okay, I'm going to read this 70-page document about dirt to see what I find, and then like 4 hours later, I'm like googling all these like, what is an isotope? You know, like what is like all the different ways of like cleaning bones, like getting into it. We used to have a show in I suppose it was from the BBC, so it's probably everywhere, but it was called Time Team, and it was like Sunday night viewing, and it was an archaeology program on prime time television in Britain. Was an archaeology program, and
Amazing.
they would like, we're in a field in Sussex and we're going to be excavating anyway. And what they would do like super early noughties like recreations of like castles, and if they found skeletons, they would work with like facial artists to like recreate what the person's face would have looked like, all this sort of stuff, and do like the storytelling of it all. And like I love that, and then haven't looked at it at all. And as soon as I'm like starting to like read archaeology reports, I'm like, oh, we're in a field in Sussex. Like I absolutely love that.
Yeah, you're there, you're with it.
Yeah.
It's with you.
But my like key texts are often they're written by a woman called Florence Marion McNeill, who is just the most interesting woman that no one has ever heard of. Very briefly, she was born in the late 1800s in an island called Orkney. She was the daughter of a minister, but a minister who was quite witchy, I think we can say. Definitely had pagan belief systems that were married into his Christian identity.
You'll love to see it.
Oh,
Yeah.
she had a bit of a tragic life, and death of family and things, and lost her mum quite young. But she like went to Glasgow University, studied Latin and English. In that time, she got politically active. She then, when she graduated, the week after she graduated, there was a big suffragist demonstration where women from all across Britain walked from their hometown to London Hyde Park, and she walked from Orkney, an island off the north coast of Scotland, to London with an Orkney banner, and became like the poster child for the young like suffragist movement in the early 1900s. And then she became like the organizer for the Women's Federation of Suffrage. She wrote and contributed towards reports about protecting young women and girls, was involved in organizations trying to legalize sex work in the 1920s. Like
Wow.
and just like she co-founded the Scottish Nationalist Party, which I think was like 7 years after women got the vote. She served as the political party's first vice president. Insane woman. But she also wrote a series of books all about like Scottish folklore. And this book, which I'm holding up to camera and I will describe for
Please also take a picture of it for us too. Yeah.
is called Hallowe'en. It's origin rites ceremonies in the Scottish tradition. She also wrote a 4 parts. I'll send it over to you because I've got it in PDF. And she wrote 4 books that takes like folk belief through those quarter days that I talked about in the year. It looks at regional celebrations. It talks about what are the foundations of like witchcraft and pagan religions and things. There's a slight like late Victorian slant on everything, but I managed to find a recording of her from the 1940s where she's talking just about life from growing up in Orkney, and talks about the witch that like bewitched the butter that was in her kitchen, and the milk would never turn to butter, so they had to go and find a good witch who would come along, and she put an incantation, a silver penny, threw it in, and then the butter began to come together. And then she was talking about like, yes, I believe in mermaids. Some of my friends have seen them. I haven't seen them myself, but they're known to come up to the like, just so like living in what we would now consider like absolute bonkers levels of superstition. But, but a very smart, learned
matter
woman.
of fact, yeah.
But it was that upbringing in those islands where like that folk belief and custom is still very much alive. Maybe not as much now, but certainly back then. But yeah, so in this book called Hallowe'en, she details like the origins of the festival, and a lot of it. The talk in this is a lot about like the the Gaels, the kind of early Celtic tribes that lived in Scotland, they believed that in a day, night starts a new day. So the day starts at sunset, and you go to
Oh.
bed in the middle of your day, and you wake up when it's bright, and that's the end of the day.
Huh.
And so they thought that dark comes before light. So they thought that death brings life. And so when the year, when the outside weather, when the season begins to die in autumn, it's actually the beginning of a new year. And Samhain, which sits on that October 31st, is actually, we believe, was New Year for Scotland's early people. And so lots
Oh.
of the kind of superstitions and the slight eeriness and connotations of death were actually incredibly positive, because it meant that new life was coming out of this kind of dark time. And so lots of the things where we have like trick or treating or going around dressing up in costumes like really started. Have you covered this sort of stuff in the podcast? I didn't listen to
We've
your last Halloween episodes.
we did a few years ago sort of an overview of Samhain, but it was not. It didn't involve reading any books from the 1940s.
Right,
I would
great.
say.
It was
No,
all like
It was an
online
overview.
research.
perfect. Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was, yeah.
We did though touch a little bit. I mean, everyone loves a refresher. Also, please don't listen to it because I feel like our pronunciations, mine especially, will be
Oh,
so bad.
great! No, I love it. I love it. We love the investment and care of trying to pull out things from another culture and doing it some justice. So like the um people believed it as we're coming towards this time of death that the veil between the worlds was thinning. And what that meant was that people from the other side might come back and visit. It also meant that gods might travel through and visit us in this life. And so actually a lot of the time it was like the fear sometimes came that if you had owed someone a debt that had passed, that they might come back and visit you at this time.
Pay
And so
up.
if you had to go traveling anywhere, you would put on a mask, a disguise, wear a headpiece or something that attracts someone to be able to get, find out who you are, or for the fairies to come and get you. And then this kind of slowly like grows in popularity of this time of year, but it perhaps as it begins to get inherited by more the younger people. And this is the root of dressing up in fancy dress for Halloween, was disguising yourself to avoid malicious spirits or people that are trying to settle a debt. And we have there are like
Fascinating.
rules for what you were supposed to dress up as, and you're like your witches, gruagris, brownies, kelpies. These are all like ancient beasts and mythological beings. And one of the hypotheses that we have now is that these, when we hear about them in the kind of 18th and 19th and 20th century, they're malicious beings. They're greedy, they're tricksters, they all have little sometimes they do favors and sometimes they'll drown you in a bog, that sort of thing. What we kind of the modern hypothesis now is that actually all of these beings were originally deities in Scottish religion before, when we had the Celtic Church and when we had polytheism in Scotland. It was all the different gods that you might pray to, gods of the forest, of the rivers, of the trees, of the animals of the fields. And what happened over time is churches began to work those beings into Christianity, or in the early kind of Celtic churches. They took their attributes and made them evil, and then they became things that people would dress up as and go around. And part of it was about that if you dressed like a god or you dressed like one of these beasts, you were less likely to get bothered by other malicious spirits. But this is again where we start to see like the trick or treating, the going out. It begins to get inherited by the younger people of your communities, and we call it guising, which is really just disguising in Scotland.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. It's also
Yeah.
so interesting how it then filters and distills and changes over here in America, because you also had people coming over from these countries, immigrating, and then passing these traditions down. And so, like, the stories you hear from American history and traditions is
Mm.
it's not very different. It just, I feel like, uh, it's like smatterings of that history, kind of, all blended with multiple,
Yeah. Well, so much
filters.
of like the culture here is like someone before the internet, before telephones, going far from their homeland and being like, what do I remember every single year? And then
Yeah.
the
Yes.
memories start to feed on themselves. So you say, well, last year I did this. So, and then, it just
Yeah.
comes a little further and further away.
Yeah. What I find really interesting, or like one of my kind of things that I'm trying to work on just now, is that I think we give like North Americans a really difficult time of identifying as Scottish.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some like bad habits that we all have, and sometimes for people talking about Scotland, it's reducing a culture to a clan and a castle and four four food
Right.
items that you can get over in the States. Or there's bits and pieces that are just like, and you, because you hear the same things all the time, and because maybe there's a bit of like, you didn't have to live through the poverty of Scotland from the 60s to the 90s to really kind of give yourself the attribute of being Scottish. There's a bit of that we hold on to, and lots of our culture has been colonized and taken. And Braveheart, we will never forget Braveheart. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
what my new kind of thoughts on it are really that if you could imagine that you had to leave your home because you were being cleared from your land, or because you didn't have money to survive in this country, or because someone's going to give you a job on the other side, and you had to leave all of your family and friends and go to a new place alone, and the only comfort you had was that there was probably other people on the boat that you had a shared identity and culture with, and you got to a new place and you stayed in touch and you created community, and you wanted for nothing more than for your children to feel every part as Scottish as you did, you would instill in them a level, like an appreciation for that culture that they would carry with them and pass on to the next generation. Now, that culture often freezes at the time that people leave that country, because it
Mm-hmm.
stays at that's the influence, that's the point of
Mm-hmm.
connection you have. And it starts in that new journey of that, that food. It's not necessarily just Scottish food anymore, it's Scottish American food, or
Mm-hmm.
Scottish Irish food, or Irish American, it's whatever you're called. But it is still every part as important as our people, because the mission for that, that woman 150 years ago was just to keep Scotland alive for them.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
we need to begin to put on our kid gloves sometimes when we're educating or when we're trying to advocate for our culture. There was just people that wanted to keep the recipes, that wanted to keep the family
Yes.
memories and the family stories and all of that alive, because they were separated from home.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm gonna cry again. I mean, yeah, I know we're deviating a bit from Samhain and
Sorry.
Halloween, but no, I think this is something I think about all the time, because I am
Mm-hmm.
adopted as well as American, and like I was I was born in Seoul, South Korea, and removed from that land, and also we also were colonized. We also
Mm-hmm.
had imperial power, so feel you on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's so interesting to think about like North America, aside from the indigenous people who live there and experience their own trauma historically, right,
Mm-hmm.
of genocide and occupation, um, of being these countries of orphans, like in a way, like we all left, right, like we're all immigrants and
Mm-hmm.
over here. And I think it's so funny, the political issues we're facing, not funny, haha, but ironic, I guess, because you're right. I do think like my husband, he's Italian and Irish and the American, and the way they cling to their culture, their identity is so
Mm.
inherently Italian American.
Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
people in Italy, in like southern Italy, where his family, previous generations came from, would not recognize probably any of the dishes that they serve. But
Mm-hmm.
food is
Mm.
such a big connector for them. I cook Korean
Yeah.
food pretty much exclusively because it is how I feel connected to my homeland, even
Mm.
though I know, oh, I'm gonna cry. Sorry, that like I will never be fully of my homeland because I
Mm.
wasn't raised there. I didn't grow up there. Even though I might have family still back there, even though my ancestors are from there, but we learn through our history, right? We connect through looking at what came before and the people who came before and the stories that came before. And one of the biggest ways I think we all connect is through those folk traditions and
Mm.
food. and like incorporating. I love to incorporate Korean folk traditions in my day-to-day life. I love incorporating Korean food into my day-to-day life. And like my
Yeah.
father's Irish. I like Irish American. I also love to incorporate his Irish American culture that was passed down from his grandparents to me.
Mm,
It is totally different than probably what is
yeah.
actually happening in Ireland, but like it is how we feel a little more tethered, I think,
Yeah.
sometimes, if I
I
can
think
speak at
we
least for myself.
no, I think that makes absolute sense, and it's sometimes in history we can get very, and when we're talking about our own personal history, we can get very like fixed in this idea of bloodlines,
Mm.
which really don't mean anything. A love
Hmm.
for a country or an appreciation for food, broadly speaking, without getting into epigenetics and taste, is not inherited through blood. It's inherited through community and culture. So, like a lot of my work, so I do deliver. Like I have day jobs. I don't work fully for as a food historian. If anyone wants to be a patron of my art, please do give me my job. But so in my
Palantir? No, I'm just kidding.
the context that I work for YMCA Scotland. In America, Ys
Oh,
are all
amazing.
gyms. Over here, they're all it's like youth charities.
Mm.
But I do a national project which is just looking on how do we make the lives of young people with care experience better. So that's people that have been through adopting, fostering, kinship care, had to whatever from whatever time that you were not in a family unit for however long, because we see they have this. It has the same impact on people, and it's about that. Like for lots of people, it's a loss of community, identity, and a number of other things. But that changed my entire approach to how I talk about food and family recipes, because family recipes are very important to me. But when we only talk about family recipes and recipes that have been passed down, when we talk about food culture, we miss an entire part of the other parts of connected food, which is food by community, food by
Mm.
place, food by
Hmm.
land. It's
Hmm.
food by exchange. It's all the things which come by being part of a person in a place at a time. We talk about like ethnology in Scotland is about people, a place, and a time, and a social milieu, something which gels them together. And that means the great thing about that is that we have it's the 100-year anniversary. Let me grab it here. Reaching behind me for a book. Um,
Love a
it's
prop.
it's the 100-year anniversary for a book from an organisation called the Scottish Women's Rural Institute. Now, this was started in 1915, 1917, really as a way for like rural women to one, find community, to get better at like managing a home, because husbands were off at war, there's no money for anything, you need to know how to do everything from making your own vinegar to your own ginger beer to how to manage a garden. But they created this book in 1925, and it was
Wow.
created because they put out a call to all the women who were in their institutes across Scotland: send us your family recipes. And they printed them with their name, so Mrs. Thomas, and then it says the town they were from.
Ugh,
Now,
I
this
love
book
that.
maybe has over 200 recipes from all across Scotland. And when I say sometimes people might not have relationships with family, people might not have relationships with genetics, but if you're in a place, there are recipes for that place. If you are in a community, there are recipes for that community. And while your relationship with your own ancestors might be something that's very difficult, if you can look at that time and the place and you can look at a bowl and add things into it and mix it into it, and you're doing that recipe from 100 years ago, you're joining a link of people who in that place have mixed things in a bowl, standing over it, looking down, smelling those ingredients, feeling those textures. That is that interaction with ancestors that we can all have,
Absolutely.
regardless of our relationship with bloodlines.
Oh my god, I'm
Mhm.
crying again. No, but that is a spell book. What you have there, and also please take
Yes.
photos of your book so we can post them on our Instagram. Though that what a powerful spell book that is, and I
Mm-hmm.
think so many people in the witchy, esoteric, eclectic, spiritual community, whatever you want to call it, are often brought to it because they feel uh they didn't feel welcome maybe, or like they don't have that best relationship with how they were raised or brought up, or
Mm.
the institutions they were born into. I
Yep.
think it's very similar. Like I'm also queer and bisexual, like for the and queer community
Yep.
and the theater community, like we're all just a bunch of outcasts coming together and forming our own found families, our own found communities. And how
Yeah.
beautiful is that, that like when you participate in folk traditions, when you make an old recipe, when you read an old book and look into history, I love that image you said, that you're like, you're creating your own history, your own ancestry. You're joining in that community of all of these people, regardless of whether or not you're blood related to them.
Yeah. No, it's a wonder, and it's let's take a but like with that, we in those books, and in any book that I go to, I always end up going for recipes because I love to like compare and contrast. But back to this book, the Halloween book in here,
Yes.
Florence that wrote it, she was a food writer. And so at the end of this book, we have a number of recipes for people to use. And like some of it is really closely linked with folklore. So for example, there's a thing called champit tatties, which I was going to say guess what it is, but Emily, with your Irish
Cabbage
studies,
and potato.
it's just so champit is mashed and tatties is potatoes. So it's just
I was
mashed
like something
potatoes.
with boobs.
Oh, I was thinking, what am I thinking of? Champ is something else. Well,
Champit. Well, no. Well, there's like every Scottish and Irish recipe, and lots of the Welsh recipes as well. It's like root vegetable with another root vegetable and a brassica, and then you mash it with like butter and you serve it. But so like
you could have not told me the name of it, and I probably would have guessed cabbage and potato.
Guessed cabbage and potatoes. But like so, like we have in champit tatties, the way you eat this is you make your champit tatties and then you scatter in charms. Now, it was charms that were associated with luck or divination. So it could be very specific things, where it could be a ring that was going to signify marriage. It could have been a bobbin to talk about work. There's lots of, people would throw things into it, and then everyone would take a spoon and you would go through it and you would eat the potatoes and try to find this charm.
Gosh.
And it's the beginning. We see like divination, this idea of fortune telling, of it's so ingrained into all of our quarter days and all of our feasts. We also have like apples are a real like present fruit in Halloween. Part of it is seasonality. I mean, something is in abundance, it means you can waste it sometimes. And in a culture where you have very little food waste because people are starving, having something like an apple that can become mystical all of a sudden and tell you lots of stuff. So we have two rites that are associated with apples, and that's ordeal by water and ordeal by fire. Now, the ordeal with water was quite simple, what we call duking for apples, or dunking yourself for apples. It was a way
bobbing.
Bobbing for, exactly, bobbing for apples. So this comes from a time when you would put the waters into apple. It used to believe that apples were something that was in the abundance in the afterlife, and so when you, in a river, a pond, or later on a bucket, when you went through the water, it was like you were going through the afterlife to bring back fortune. And if you could grab it and pull it back, the fortune was going to come back with you into this life. Now, the ordeal by fire is slightly more dangerous, as you would imagine.
Color me intrigued.
This was an ordeal to determine skill. And again, it was based in fortune, but it was about your ability. So you would take an apple, you would drill a hole in it, put a stick through it, and on the other end, light a candle, put it on a string in the middle of the room, and then spin it. And this candle and this apple would spin around the room, and teenagers would take turns trying to bite the apple. Now, I would love to try it.
In a safe warehouse made out of concrete.
Yeah.
Extinguisher nearby.
No, exactly. And I'm sure that this is, I mean, of course, like the people that would have like had the worst would have been women with long hair. But like a few singed cheeks and things. But the idea was that you had to like get through it. By the time you get to the 90s, we've lost the apple and the candle, but it's turned to essentially a giant pancake that gets covered in treacle, and it would get hung up in the middle of the room. You had to put your arms behind your back and try and bite your way around it and eat it without getting covered in treacle. And then
we do that with donuts over here now.
Right.
You do?
It turned into
we do?
It turned into
I did.
It turned into sugar donuts because you get the sugar all over your face. But the
That's
idea
so funny.
that comes from this ordeal of skill to access fortune, this apple and a candle to singe a few layers of fringe off.
We kind of lost the meaning of that over here in my Buffalo suburb when I did it growing up. It was just more for a fun party game for kids, but I love that.
But
Porridge.
I mean, I always, when I'm talking, I do a lot of work in schools, and I always, there's a piece of folklore that you're only allowed to stir porridge in a clockwise direction.
Mhm.
Now, if you spin it anti-clockwise, it said that you would stir in demons or
Oh.
even awaken the devil himself. Now,
Yikes.
my hypothesis is that when you stir porridge lots of different ways, you develop gluten, it becomes gummy, breaks down the texture. There's probably a kid 300 years ago who was given the task of standing over the fire and spinning and just stirring the porridge, and he was going haywire, and his mum said, if you stir it anti-clockwise, you're going to stir in the devil. And he told his mates, and he told his mates, and they told their mates.
Yeah.
And 300 years later, it's a piece of folklore that we report on. But
I love
actually,
that.
it's probably just like it's all just someone saying something at some time which is exciting or a story told really well that catches on.
Yeah, I love that theory. Well, we've had past guests talk about how like our words are spells. Speaking things into existence makes it so. And so, look at history and the oral traditions. I mean, so who's to say? Don't stir in the devil. I don't know.
No, exactly. I've been looking at like essentially when did everything go wrong? And
a light subject, yeah.
Like when did power imbalance come into Scotland in a way that disrupted our way of life and changed our relationship to the land and people and culture and da-da-da. And I think some of it is to do with the Reformation and actually how churches were dismantled and people were brought into line around a very particular set of beliefs. And actually, even before that, the Roman Catholic, Celtic Church being converted to a Roman Catholic Church that then adhered to feast days and created hierarchy in the land was really disruptive. And I've been looking at the impact on women's rights because I think women's rights are a real clear indicator of how well your civilization is doing.
Word.
And the we won't go too deeply into this because I can't do it justice and I don't have references right now, but essentially at different points in Scotland's history, women's rights have been limited to where essentially we have parish boards across Scotland. A woman, if she tried to run away from her community, her family, the parish boards would work together to bring her back. She couldn't run away. Women were limited and stuck and often abused as a natural part of life at several points in Scottish history for long periods of time. If you thought that you were poisoning porridge by stirring it anti-clockwise, would that have been a solace for a woman that couldn't escape? That she's going to skip porridge that day and serve it to her husband after stirring it anti-clockwise and hoping to summon the devil? Is the whisper of witchcraft and folklore a thing that provides relief, a sense of power, a sense of agency that you can whisper to yourself? And I think there's a lot more work that I need to do in looking at that link between witchcraft, the feminine secrets, and the power imbalance in Scotland at different points. But that could have been a lifeline. I think even for myself, when I feel out of control, we look for action. When I feel hopeless, you turn that into motivation. And if the only way you could do that was in these little acts of rebellion, while still maintaining your duties, but tapping into something metaphysical, I think there's an interesting story to be found there.
Right.
Absolutely.
Sometimes rebellion is just in the heart and the head, and that's the seed that can make it go further someday.
one quick anti-clockwise on some porridge.
I mean, we don't have time to get into this, but I believe a lot of the women who were accused of witchcraft who were burned at the stake in Europe, and then were midwives and were women medical practitioners. And so once we got into patriarchal systems that upheld
people that were threatening to the state,
So it's definitely intertwined for sure. And yeah, again, it's that time of the month, I think, because I'm gonna cry again because I love how everything you say, Peter, just hits me right in the heart. It's so good.
Good. I came
So,
on, yeah, I was like, I'm going to make Kate cry 4
That-
times today.
Goal achieved, my friend. Goal achieved.
Yeah.
veil must be thinning or something.
But yeah,
No, that's it.
The
That's
veil's
it.
very thin. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Oh my goodness.
So Peter, you've been doing all this reading about Halloween, and you've been reading this book. Is there anything in particular that you're doing with it? Are you working on any projects, or is it?
Yeah, so 2 things just now. I'm working with another. I released this Origin series last year, and then Instagram had their dispute with Universal and muted all my videos. So I'm re-releasing everything that I've released before from last year, which is just actually
Sneaky bitches.
a digestible under 3 minutes history, Halloween history, and I think in 7 parts, and it kind of goes through like the very basic foundations of Samhain and how it became Halloween. And then we're going to do a bit about, there's some references to like when you grew out of guising, you got into matchmaking territory, and those kind of teenage to the kind of early 20s adults, they would have their own Halloween culture, which included taking baskets and prams filled with food around people's houses, and you would exchange the food for whiskey and a fire. And so we made it last year. We made a basket of all the food that they referenced from 200 years ago, with like there's a weird thing called like there's a reested mutton. Reested is a space above a fireplace in like cottages, and you would kind of brine meat and then hang it up there to smoke with the smoke that would come out of the fire. So you would do that with a leg of or shoulder of lamb, and it was very salty, and you would take it to reested mutton to your like that house you were going to. You could, like, the great thing about it, because it was so salty, you could boil it in water, then use that water as stock, then rip off the meat. It was like a do your own soup kit but purely lamb. And another thing called like sparrows, where they're like essentially like a Scottish chorizo. It's like a salted beef sausage that again you kind of like snap. Do I have any here? I do.
Share some with the class.
Wow.
I love lamb so much.
Immediately took off my headphones. No, so they're like these kind. I mean, these are for show and tell, not for eating anymore. But they're these beef, and they're like really dry, and you like rehydrate them in water. But so the reason I tell you this is because so much of Scottish feasting and food at this time revolves around community, and I believe that there's a real culture in our food history, in our feast history, where you don't ask for someone to ask for food. You come with it first. When food is scarce, when you don't want to put someone in the position of having to ask for it, and if they have enough, you still give it. It's plenty because it's always shared with the community. And something like recent mutton or sparrows, that could hang for 6 months over the cooker, and if there's a day when they don't have food, they snap off a bit, boil it in water, you've got a soup ready to go, that sort of stuff.
Love that.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff.
So that's right.
That's
Anyway,
really
yes, that's all going to be in that series. That's why I'm talking about it. That's what you asked me.
Yeah.
I'm working with my partner just now. We're doing a project. He's an illustrator, and we don't have like real drawings of all these, the Gruagichs, the Selkies, all these mystical beings. So we're working together to try and illustrate them all and tell their story, and hopefully a slightly less through the lens of maybe what they used to be, not the malevolent evil beasts they were painted out to be, and to do a bit of storytelling about it. So that's what I'm working on just now. So yeah, follow me on Tenement Kitchen on Instagram and TikTok to see some of that. And then we'll be into Christmas very soon, and we'll get onto Yule and all things
more treats.
Oh my gosh.
Norse and pagan.
Amazing. Do you have any other questions though before we draw a card?
This is a big one. I'm going to toss it out there, and you can say pass if you want. So you mentioned that your father was a minister.
Yep.
And now you do a lot of researching folk traditions. What is your own spirituality like these days? What does that look like?
So I grew up in a Pentecostal cult, essentially, where I went to like an American, like the ACE Christian private schools, where you learn that the earth is 6,000 years old and homosexuality is a learned trait and all that lovely great stuff. But with that came a like everything you think about, even like Pentecostal evangelicals speaking in tongues and demonic warfare and all
Wow.
that kind of stuff was very present in my childhood. When I left the church at 18, I like did not want to think about it. I don't believe in anything. I'm dust and nothing matters. Let's have a drink. It was like a decade-long Rumspringa I had, and then like got to that bit in your 30s where like everything calms down a little in your life. You begin to think about things more meaningfully. You maybe start to have some existential dread and thoughts of the afterlife and all that sort of stuff, and had to start examining it. I'm very open now. I mean, I don't have. I think I would really struggle to form a fixed belief system that has tenets because I'm constantly challenging authority. Lots to do with childhood, but like I would say I'm like I have a reliance on signs and like a kind of constant, like I'll maybe have like 5 a day signs, something clicks, something goes. I'll be reading something, someone says the same word while I'm looking at the same word, or like, and if I go like a couple of weeks without anything, I'm like, what am I not doing? I'm off track. I need to move my efforts, or is there something that I know I'm doing that's taking over my mind and therefore I'm not looking for, am I too obsessed with something, that kind of stuff. That's where my like spirituality is just now, is an awareness of more, but waiting for something to present itself as for me to take the next step. And I would love to like learn more just really about that, like what we call now witchcraft, those like ancient beliefs and the ways that people communed with the metaphysical, and like sometimes it might be the communing with your own thoughts and your own intuition, whatever that is in relation to something, a force that's outside. I have all the questions, but I would say, I'm aware but not subscribed.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, that's very witchy to me.
That's being an eclectic witch.
Yeah.
You're doing what works for you.
Absolutely. And I've been working recently with a fantastic woman who goes by the name of That Glasgow Witch on Instagram and TikTok. I would thoroughly recommend that you go on, because she does a really good job at talking about her own practice. She has like I'm so jealous of her accent. She's from like 3 miles from me, but somehow just like got this like wonderful I have a bit of a rasp today because, as I said before we started recording, I've been on an island with 5,000 other gays for 4 days screaming Spice Girls lyrics, but,
living the dream.
Yeah, but I'm excited to like go down that road with someone and see what clicks, see if there's something which does that same thing sometimes when I see signs or when I feel something.
You have such an exciting journey ahead of you. There's so much going on for you. I'm so excited for you.
All right. Well, should we draw a card?
Let's do it.
Please.
Okay. So I just grabbed the closest one on my shelf, which is the Modern Tarot, which is inspired by the classic Rider-Waite-Smith Coleman deck. But I think it's actually pretty apt for this conversation because it is new, but inspired by history. Yeah, we'll reach for that.
If it's happening, it's happening for a reason, honey.
Exactly. And so I was shuffling as we were talking. I pulled the 7 of Pentacles just now.
Oh, ooh.
Okay. What does this mean?
Love. Interesting.
Okay, so
how can I translate this to my life?
I actually love having someone who doesn't read tarot here because I have a spiel.
Fantastic. Go for it.
So the Pentacles are one of the 4 suits of the tarot deck. And so the tarot deck has the major arcana and the minor arcana. And the 4 suits are basically like a deck of cards, like playing cards almost. So it's Pentacles, Wands, Swords, and Cups. I know that. I just can't think sometimes. So they're sort of like, they represent like the minor phases of your life, whereas the major is more like the big things that happen. So this is sort of like something like a condition that might be current but that could pass, something that could be like coming up. And then the Pentacles usually represent like the material world. A lot of people read them as money, but it can be more like anything that you can like touch. It's like it's got a physical presence in space. And then
Yeah.
the 7 is like abundance, right?
Yeah, I think, specifically this card too is about, as you can see, it's a modern interpretation of the traditional artwork. But it's like you've done kind of already a lot of work. You put in a lot of investment and time into what it is that you're working on. So it could be, like Emily said, could be money, could be career, but it also could be your home, your practice, your education. These are, again, things rooted in the material world, like she said. And so it's about, persevering and seeing through. The garden is built, the seeds are planted. You're not quite ready to harvest everything just yet. We're not at the 10,
Yep.
we're not at the face cards, but it is definitely
Like the fruits of your labor are on their way.
Yeah.
yeah, stay true, stay on the course, man.
It's absolutely like dead on. Do you want me to give you the interpretation?
Yeah, give it to us.
Oh yeah, tell us
Was
what you
just again this weekend, because when you drink with people you've known for a couple of decades, you get very deep very quickly. There's actually a bunch of people I haven't seen in a while, and we were talking about like food stuff, and I was saying like, I do have a very strong sense of direction in my life, and like I do think like part of sometimes feeling isolated from communities in that way, like growing up as a queer person in Christian circles or in communities where you don't fully like fit in, you can have a really strong inner dialogue where you spend a lot of time with yourself and your thoughts. The joy of that is when you get to a point in your life where you can have perspective, is that I think you can be quicker to forgive, to learn, to build things with yourself, because you already have such a strong dialogue that you can tap into really quickly with yourself. And I was saying like I feel like I'm on a trajectory where I've purposefully chosen that is aligning with my purpose, that will come to financial success, because it's okay to want financial success.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whatever that looks
You gotta
like.
eat.
But it's
Yeah.
like growing up is like that, like what is your love language? Mine is like acts of service and gifts. Because it's like when you have, I not like rattle on about being poor, but actually in the perspective of my life, growing up without resources, it's very uncomfortable. And everything that I have done is about trying to create a life that feeds me, feeds my family, looks after my aging dog, and that also is that way of ethically making money where I hope I'm making the world a better place, or at least my little society, my little community, a better place. But everything we were speaking about this weekend was about that.
You're well on your way. Yeah. No, that's all so perfect. I think that's great. And I think, I was looking at Biddy Tarot, which is like a website we use a lot to back up these card readings. Another thing she writes about is looking at the long-term view and really taking a step back and perspective, which you just spoke to. So I think absolutely right on. This card was meant for you. And if it resonates with our listeners, good for you guys too.
Yeah, I actually also just got this in a reading like 4 days ago.
Are we all in our 7 of Pentacles like
era?
Is this the new Mercury in retrograde? Sorry, I'm in my 7 of Pentacles. Yeah,
we're in our 7 of Pentacles era. Yes, I love that for us. I love that for all of us. Well, remind everyone one more time where they can find you and subscribe and give you money and listen to your beautiful voice and all of that.
I was thinking about starting a Substack. Anyway, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Tenement Kitchen. Tenement is spelt with all E's and T's and M's and N's, but people often go Tenna, Tina, or whatever. So yeah, Tenement Kitchen. Come say hello. I would love to welcome you into the Scottish food history community.
Amazing.
Yes, and we'll have you tagged on our Instagram and linked on our website, which of course our Instagram is at Witchcast Podcast. Our website is witchcastpodcast.com, and you can email us at witchcastpodcast@gmail.com with any questions, thoughts, feelings, spells, snack recipes, whatever you've got going on.
If anyone does have any food spells or witchy food facts, send them to your Instagram, my Instagram. Tag us all, please. I want to see more.
I would 100%. Love. Oh, that's such a good idea. Thank you so much again for being on, Peter. It's such a delight talking to you.
Yeah. I want to plug actually one thing you've been working on, which is that Peter also does a little mini series of shorts called Drinking with Your Ancestors or Drinking with My Ancestors.
It's called Getting Pissed with My Ancestors.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Do correct me on that.
So, no.
Way better.
I'm really regretting it now because we have really strict licensing laws in Scotland, and drinks companies do not want to work with me because I'm talking about getting drunk.
So bastards.
The series may slowly just change into season 2 of Drinking with Your Ancestors.
Okay. Sorry,
that's hilarious.
Yes, no. The rule of the series is I use historic recipes for alcohol and the equipment that my ancestors would have had, and try to recreate historic homebrews, drinks, and cocktails.
Love that.
Yeah. So definitely check it all out. And hey, while you're out there on the internet, you can always leave this podcast a 5-star review wherever you get your fine podcasts. For example, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or really anywhere else. If you're listening to it on one of those like Link NYC stations on the street, that's fine too. If you can find a place to leave 5 stars.
And if you can't find us on your favorite platform, please message us and we'll get on it for you.
Yeah. And until next time, heck
Heck
yeah!
'Cause it's Witchcast.
Okay, great.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh my God, I love